People often repeat a line pinned to Nathan Rothschild: "Control the money of Britain, and you control the British Empire," and he implied that control rested in his hands. Whether that sentence was spoken verbatim or polished by time, its spirit captures how the Rothschild family shaped markets, state finance, and policy-making. Their reach affected how governments borrowed, how wars were funded, and how the architecture of the modern economy took form. For much of the 19th century, ministers weighed choices with an eye to what the Rothschild houses would or would not underwrite. Most know the name as shorthand for a rich banking clan, but that shorthand misses the scale of their influence. Another quip attributed to Nathan claims indifference to who sat on England's throne, so long as issuance of money remained in his orbit. Authentic or not, it reveals an early grasp of a durable truth. Liquidity guides power. Nathan was one of 5 sons who led the family's branches, each planted in a major European capital and each deeply enmeshed in its host country's financial system. From financing coalitions against Napoleon to seeding the Industrial Revolution's growth, the Rothschilds became a family whose name signaled reach and leverage. By the way, if you love money, subscribe to the channel and give it a like. Now, let's continue. The tale begins with Mayer Amschel Rothschild. He was born in 1744 in Frankfurt's Judengasse, a cramped lane dense with Jewish life and hedged in by rules, curfews, and exclusions. Entry to parks and coffee houses was denied. Gatherings larger than 2 could invite punishment. Mayer's childhood horizon was narrow, and he originally trained for the rabbinate. The death of his parents forced a pivot. He entered a banking house as an apprentice and learned the grammar of finance: bills of exchange, specie, merchant credit, and the pricing of risk. There he specialized in trading ancient coins coveted by European elites, Roman, Persian, and Byzantine pieces whose provenance could command high prices. An understanding that rare artifacts convey trust and status would later serve him well. Frankfurt's trade fairs gave Mayer a laboratory. Sorting coins for buyers from across the region taught him quality, arbitrage, and speed. By 19, he returned to his father's shop with a practiced hand and began dealing on his own. His skill drew Crown Prince Wilhelm of Hesse, who appointed him a court factor, a Jewish financier charged with arranging credit and supplying hard-to-source goods for a noble household. That post unlocked clients and collateral beyond the ghetto's walls and allowed Mayer to scale. The foundations of a dynasty were laid in those years. Mayer then put geography to work. He sent his sons outward with 2 rules. First, court reigning houses and sovereign borrowers. Their signatures buy safety along with profit. Second, raise heirs who can run desks abroad and tighten the network. The intention was diversification before the term was popular. Dispersing risk across borders reduced exposure to any single ruler or market swing. Cultivating favor with local elites wrapped the business in protective prestige. By the early 1800s, 5 interconnected houses, Frankfurt, London, Paris, Vienna, and Naples, had formed what was, in effect, the first banking network to cross borders at such scale. That structure granted a kind of neutrality. The brothers could move funds across frontiers, broker settlements, and broaden services from luxury goods and coin to government loans. Wars accelerated their rise. From 1792 to 1815, the French Revolutionary and Napoleonic conflicts demanded massive finance. The family arranged loans for princes, moved grain and cotton, and, within legal gray zones, supplied arms. They exploited arbitrage and velocity, backing both sides when prudent. In Paris, James Jacob Rothschild extended credit to Napoleon's regime. In London, Nathan backed Britain and Wellington's armies. As the wars unfolded, the calculus favored Britain's institutions and prospects, and funding tilted accordingly. Tight money for Napoleon contrasted with expanding support for the coalition, and the family's lines of credit helped determine what campaigns could be mounted. They were not generals, but money schedules can decide which generals march. The family's wartime book was not a single bet, but a matrix of acceptances, forward bills, and bullion consignments that could be rerouted if a frontier closed. Couriers carried duplicate instructions to agents in Amsterdam, Antwerp, Hamburg, and Trieste, so that one capture did not paralyze a payment. Silver was bought where it cleared cheaply, and sold where soldiers needed pay, with exchange losses hedged by opposite positions in London and Paris. When Napoleon tightened the continental system, the brothers responded by clearing through neutral ports, moving goods as colonial produce, and settling balances with time drafts rather than metal. Insurance was sliced across several underwriters, so a single loss could not sink a convoy. In southern Germany and northern Italy, local partners advanced grain to commissaries on the strength of London acceptances. The London House then refinanced those claims in the market, converting army requisitions into negotiable paper. Where coin was short, they used transfers on Rothschild accounts as money, allowing suppliers to offset what they were owed in one city against what they owed in another. That internal clearing reduced the drag of transport and cut the opportunity for theft. By separating credit decisions from physical movement, the houses kept campaigns liquid when treasuries were near exhaustion. Intelligence flowed the same way as funds. Agents reported not only prices but troop movements, river levels, and the mood of local bankers. When bridges were down, routes shifted. When a city imposed forced loans, exposure was trimmed before decrees took effect. The goal was constant. Make sure the side most likely to survive could always buy bread, powder, and passage, and charge a margin that rewarded the risk. Their operating rule was simple: preserve settlement, diversify routes, and keep maturities short when uncertainty rose. Nathan paired appetite for risk with a need for speed. Early French successes sent British bond prices down. He bought when others panicked. He built a courier network that outpaced official dispatches, using early information to position ahead of the crowd. When news of Waterloo finally reached markets, he had already acted, and profits followed. Such moves made a legend and also made a target. In France, where Napoleon had eased many civil restrictions on Jews, a Jewish banking family aligned with his enemies became a symbol for critics. As industrialization deepened social anxiety, the Rothschild name was used to personify mobile capital and inequality. Those charges would be recycled by nationalist movements in later decades, even as the family adapted its business. Speed alone did not explain the edge. It was speed combined with structure. Nathan broke large purchases into sequences of smaller orders routed through different brokers so as not to alarm the market. He lent against consignments of bullion arriving from Iberia and took repayment in government securities, which then served as collateral for fresh loans, a flywheel effect that multiplied capacity. His couriers rode stage lines with designated handoff points and code names. If a rider failed to arrive by a set hour, the next relay started anyway with a duplicate packet. In London, he kept price sheets that compared jobbers' quotes across the day. Abrupt spreads signaled stress or rumor and triggered pre-written instructions. News from the Low Countries before Waterloo allowed him to reverse hedges and accumulate consols cheaply. When confirmation circulated publicly, he fed stock back gradually to avoid killing the rise he benefited from. He preferred options embedded in forward settlements to blunt visible wagers, and he maintained relationships with bill brokers who could rediscount Rothschild paper on demand. That liquidity let him honor drafts even when official remittances lagged. In Paris, his brother managed exposure by shortening maturities as the regime's prospects dimmed, converting longer loans into trade paper that could be run off quickly. Reputation closed the loop. Merchants accepted a Rothschild signature as good tender. Officers accepted a Rothschild promise as near cash. Critics saw manipulation. Practitioners saw craft. Either way, the system delivered predictable settlement in an age when defeat often meant default. Their operating rule was simple: preserve settlement, diversify routes, and keep maturities short when uncertainty rose. After the cannons quieted, the houses pivoted to government securities, insurance, and shares in industry. Railways, coal, and metals drew their capital. Tracks and furnaces rose with their money. Mayer, aware that mortality could fracture a fortune, tried to engineer continuity. His will concentrated control in male lines and encouraged marriages within the extended family, keeping assets under a single umbrella. Between the 1820s and the late 19th century, cousin unions were common, preserving capital and managerial cohesion. A further decision was to favor liquid assets over estates and bullion. Paper claims can be moved and hidden. Palaces can be seized. If violence erupted, there would be little for a mob to destroy. The main wealth sat in ledgers scattered across jurisdictions. The peacetime portfolio was designed for breadth and resilience. In London, the house made a market in consols and exchequer bills, earning a thin spread that scaled with volume while reserving balance sheet for syndicates on large issues. On the continent, they underwrote indemnity loans and converted chaotic wartime debts into uniform bonds with clear coupons and calendars, which reduced uncertainty and raised prices for clients they advised. Railway finance added a new layer. Lines were broken into sections, with stage capital calls tied to milestones, so investors were not dragged into unfinished works. Coal, iron, and metallurgical ventures were paired with transport links to secure output and protect margins. Inside the house, Mayer's rules about inheritance functioned as governance. Male succession kept voting blocks intact. Marriages among cousins aligned incentives across branches when law made formal mergers awkward. Minutes of partners' meetings set credit limits for each office, and interbranch balances were settled on fixed days so no unit could overrun the rest without notice. The preference for liquid claims was a deliberate answer to politics. Where estates could be taxed or confiscated, a ledger entry could be moved. Where mobs could shatter windows, a bill of exchange could cross a border, folded in a pocket. When the family funded museums, hospitals, and schools, it was not only benevolence, it embedded the name in civic life and created allies who valued stability. The method was consistent: standardize contracts, deepen markets, and keep the option to move fast when the weather turned. Their operating rule was simple: preserve settlement, diversify routes, and keep maturities short when uncertainty rose. Among the brothers, Nathan's London house shone brightest. In 1835, he secured rights to mercury mines in Spain, gaining control over a metal essential to refining gold and silver. He built close ties to the Bank of England and the Royal Mint, helping to refine bullion and anchoring London's financial credibility. Profits were reinvested. The family grew positions in non-ferrous metals and energy, taking large stakes in companies such as Rio Tinto and later Royal Dutch Shell. By mid-century, their name could move markets. They were also patrons of culture and science. Collections of art, manuscripts, plants, and animal specimens were assembled and then shared with museums and gardens. Curiosity was as much a motive as prestige. Those gifts still enrich institutions today. Governments frequently turned to the Rothschilds in crisis. After France fell to Prussia in 1871, the family organized loans that helped the state stabilize. In London, they advanced £4 million on short notice so Britain could buy a commanding stake in the Suez Canal Company, shrinking the route to India and tightening imperial logistics. Their ability to mobilize capital also shaped Africa's scramble. Financing linked to figures like Cecil Rhodes fed diamond ventures and benefited companies like De Beers. In the United States, their reach surfaced through relationships with banks such as the National City Bank of Cleveland and through financiers like Jacob Schiff, who had ancestral ties to Frankfurt's Jewish quarter. Credit supported John D. Rockefeller as Standard Oil consolidated refineries, with rebate deals on railroads compounding the firm's advantage and pushing Rockefeller toward immense wealth. A separate strand tied the family to Jewish communal leadership and to the long politics of a homeland. In 1917, Britain issued the Balfour Declaration, signaling support for a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. The letter was addressed to Lionel Walter Rothschild, recognized as a leader of British Jewry. Long before that note, and long after, the family funded schools, settlements, and charities. In Frankfurt alone, they ran dozens of foundations libraries, hospitals, orphanages, elder care, and scholarships. Honors accumulated. The 5 sons were made barons of the Austrian Empire. In Britain, a Rothschild took a seat in Parliament and later entered the peerage. The head of the London house was often treated as an unofficial representative of British Jewry. Decline, when it came, arrived in steps. The Naples branch closed in 1863 in the wake of Italian unification and the fall of the Bourbon Order. Frankfurt shuttered in 1901 for lack of a male heir. Vienna's branch suffered gravely after the Nazi annexation of Austria. Relatives fled or were imprisoned. Art and property were seized, and releases sometimes required ransom. In occupied France, assets were taken as well. Though the Paris business survived the war, post-war politics dealt a final blow. In 1982, the socialist government nationalized the bank, ending that original house. London endured as the most resilient of the 5, yet the family did not vanish. In the new century, their businesses were reorganized under a single structure and spread across financial services, real estate, mining, energy, and philanthropy. They also developed a notable portfolio of wineries. Many descendants now work within those enterprises or invest alongside them. One of the institutions rooted in Nathan's era continues as a modern merchant bank, reporting strong revenues and meaningful assets under management. However the totals are assembled, the family's combined holdings still place them among the wealthiest in the world. Scholars continue to separate myth from record when assessing Rothschild power. The safe judgment is that legend aggrandizes but does not wholly invent. A family that began in a single narrow lane built a cross-border network that financed wars, railways, mines, and museums. Their ascent turned on contingent decisions. Had Mayer's parents lived, he might have remained a scholar of law and faith rather than a student of ledgers. Alter that hinge, and the financial plumbing of 19th century Europe would look different. Perhaps Napoleon's arc would have bent another way. Perhaps Britain's grip would have loosened. Perhaps different names would fill the history of capital. What stands is the pattern the family understood early. Money does not just follow power, it constructs it. To see how they did it, consider the system's mechanics. Speed mattered. Private couriers outran official posts. Coded correspondence reduced interception risks. Pricing of credit reflected political weather with a granularity most treasuries could not match. Arbitrage between markets turned information into profit. None of this was magic. It was discipline and logistics. Reputation mattered too. Rulers who honored obligations gained access to a continental pool of savings. Rulers who defaulted found shutters closing in more than one city. In this sense, the brothers were both players and referees in the early international monetary order, nudging sovereigns toward credibility, because credibility lowered everyone's costs. The social dimension mattered as well. Hospitals, schools, and galleries funded by the family converted abstract credit into visible public goods. Those projects softened hostility and invited cooperation. They also revealed genuine curiosity. Some Rothschilds collected orchids and beetles, others manuscripts and music. Wealth turned into archives, gardens, and concert halls, as much as into debentures and shares. Gifts outlasted market cycles and, in some cases, outlasted the banks that funded them. A preference for liquid wealth was a shield against the volatility of prejudice. Land and mansions can be seized. A bill of exchange can be endorsed and moved. When danger rose, the fortune could contract into paper and reappear later where it was safer. The approach was an acknowledgement of risk without surrender to it. In the end, the Rothschild story is a study in networks. Build nodes, share information quickly, price risk honestly, and remain close to power without becoming its captive. They soared when those elements aligned and stumbled when geopolitics swamped even the best foresight. That mix keeps the family human rather than mythical. They were not omnipotent. They were early masters of the infrastructure beneath wars, railways, and ministries, the rails of credit along which history moved. If you made it this far, drop a plus in the comments your badge for finishing the deep dive. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more long-form stories where money, history, and power collide. Curious about earlier empires of capital? Check out our others video.